Welcome all, welcome. And again, get your questions ready. We'll be asking them very shortly. I'm going to ask you, starting with you, Dr. Dominique, say a few words. Let's introduce this panel. Let's keep it flowing. You got a couple of minutes. Go.
Great, thanks. It's a real pleasure to be here in front of all of you today to be able to talk about partnerships, which are core to my organization's mandate and strategy. I work for the International Development Research Centre, which is part of Canada's aid program focused on innovation and solutions. And part of that is in partnership with private sector, and I look forward to saying more about that today and how important innovations are to achieving agricultural transformation in Africa.
Excellent. Dr. Shingen Fan.
Well, I grew up in China. I experienced the Green Revolution in Asia. Without Green Revolution in Asia, probably billions of people have died because of hunger and malnutrition. But we also learned huge lessons. One is the environment. So we have not paid attention to environment. Our underground water table is going down. Soil has been eroded. And we have not paid enough attention to nutrition. And here in Africa, yes, 200 million people suffer from hunger, but you might not know that more than 300 million people who are suffering from hidden hunger, so lack of micronutrients. And the third lesson we learned in Asia from our Green Revolution is we have never paid enough attention to women, and not just gender. I remember when the semi-dwarf rice varieties was introduced to my village, my mother had to work 15 hours a day. So when we come here to Africa, the African Green Revolution, these are the lessons we got to learn. We must pay attention to environment. The Green Revolution should be truly green revolution. And nutrition. Not just rice. Yeah, rice, wheat, maize are important, but let's not forget about more nutritious foods. Dairy, livestock, vegetables, fruits, beans, and so on. I think Africa has great potential to do that. And the role of the private sector obviously very critical. I will let my friend Rob Smith to speak about it. But I wanted to emphasize the role of public sector, like Dr. Adesina emphasized. Public sector must increase investment in agricultural research, improve its infrastructure, education. This is the key elements of success of our Green Revolution in Asia.
Good stuff. Thank you, Dr. Fan. Thank you. Dr. Rob Smith.
AGCO is committed to its vision for Africa of transforming agriculture in Africa through inclusive and sustainable mechanization solutions. And on this panel this morning, we can bring several active and live examples of very successful public-private partnerships that are underway. We're pursuing several others, and we have some good ideas to share about some of the recipes for success to make them not only operate, but operate well and operate quickly.
Is it just me, or is he trying to speak like me? Or maybe it's just me. Okay, all right. Thank you, Doctor. Honorable Willie Bed.
Thank you. I think we have had 3 days of great stuff here at this complex discussing green revolution and agriculture transformation. On my side, I'm really very proud to work for a government who recognize the role of the private sector in transforming not only agriculture but economies. The government of Kenya, as witnessed yesterday by the president himself, is focused on partnership, especially with the private sector, because we know it's the private sector who is actually the driver. We will only make the facilitation role, something which we are currently doing, and we'll discuss more of that today.
Great, thank you, Honorable Minister. So, folks, let's get right into it. And Dr. Adesina, let me start with you, because you spoke about some successes, Ethiopia being one of them, Kenya being another. And a lot of people, a lot of skeptics say the biggest difference between private sector and, or the biggest beef, if you will, between private sector and public sector is lack of trust. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? There's a lack of trust. There's a disconnect, if you will.
Well, yeah, I think if you look at what happened with the Asian Green Revolution, the institutions that were set up to support farmers were largely driven by governments. But under the Green Revolution we're talking about now, it has to be driven by the private sector. In my view, what we need is a government-enabled, private sector-led agricultural transformation. And why do I say that? If you look at the amount of money that's going to be needed, most of that money is actually sitting there in the private sector. Just to give you some example what that can be, you have about $334 billion that is there today in pension funds in Africa. You have $164 billion that's there in terms of sovereign wealth funds. Africa gets about $56 billion in private equity funds, right? And so it just gives you the amount of money that's out there. And so unless we are able to build an environment wherein macroeconomic stability is there, the people can predict policies better, they're not going to make the investments that are necessary, because the problem is not money. The problem is how do you ensure that you deal with the risks and the perceptions of the private sector to go there. Now, when people say they distrust private sector, say, well, private sector wants to make money. Of course, they don't want to make poverty. You don't set up a business because you want to be poor. They want to make money, and they should make money. Seed companies should make money. Fertilizer companies should make money. Mechanization farms and so on should make money. So we must work with the private sector. However, to the trust question, it comes down to the credibility of government policies. It comes down to the ability to address the risk and the challenges that they face. It comes to being able to address the infrastructure gap that the private sector faces. One of the reasons why private sector is not investing in agriculture or other sectors in Africa today is just because we have no power. We're lucky to have, electricity here today. But I remember when my son was 5 years old, we came from the US, came to Nigeria, and they were taking away power every time, just about 5 times in 5 minutes. So my son looked to me and said, who is the naughty boy doing that? And they said the name of the naughty boy is called NEPA, which is the government utility. And my son didn't understand that. He said, Dad, if he does it again, I want you to take a big stick and spank NEPA. Now, what I'm saying is that if you have a continent with 650 million people without electricity, you have a continent losing 5% of its GDP for lack of electricity. You have food that's wasting there because there's no investment in electricity. The private sector will not invest unless we get the government to build the trust, not just by mouth, but doing the right things. Investing in infrastructure, investing in power, investing in roads, fixing financial systems to be able to de-risk, as I said, the risk that they face. So at the end of the day, I think trust is not what you say. Trust is really what you do.
Absolutely, Doctor. Good point there. And by the way, we have our own equivalent of NEPA here. We call it KPLC. They need to be spanked sometimes. Moving right along. Let me bring in the private sector. Dr. Rob Smith, are there good examples of PPPs out there on the continent? Have you seen this? You're on the continent, Massey Ferguson, Kimbria recently. Are there good examples?
We've got some very good examples, and I like to use the example in Algeria, as a matter of fact. Algeria is ranked 163 out of 189 countries in terms of most difficult to do business in. And you could say, would you want to go there? AGCO went to Algeria in 2012. We signed a joint venture in August. By December, we had produced our first Massey Ferguson tractor in a public-private partnership. The next year, we built 1,000. In 2014, we built 2,000. Last year, we built almost 2,500 Massey Fergusons in a very successful public-private partnership. It is profitable, and it's socially responsible. We've put in 170 jobs since 2012. We've localized 30% local content. We're on the way to doing 40, and we're about with the public sector with the government to make a further investment in a foundry that allows us to localize a significant further portion of the manufacturing there. Great example of aligned vision strong commitment from both sides, and then very dedicated implementation. That's the recipe I'd like to talk to at some point in time today, Jeff.
Absolutely. And can that be cut and pasted to other African countries, that model you used?
The approach, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're actively pursuing further public-private partnerships. We have an exciting one underway, several exciting ones underway in sub-Saharan Africa, looking at local manufacturing again, also looking at public-private investment, AGCO's investment into a public-private partnership for agri-parks. In French-speaking Africa, we're very strongly underway with the government. We've looked at several locations, and we expect later this year to break ground on the French-speaking AGCO Future Farm, which demonstrates in the classroom, demonstrates in the workshop, and then demonstrates out on the field around on the farm best practice farming. And it does the training and teaching. So that's another PPP that we have underway.
Good stuff. Okay, Cabinet Secretary Bett, as government, do you find there's that rivalry, that tug of war between yourselves and private sector?
Yes. For some time, there used to be a lot of tug of war. But the reason why that was happening is because there were no platforms for the two, the government and the private sector, to engage. More often than not, you find the private sector pointing fingers to government that you've not done this, you've not done this, you've not done this. While at the same time, they forget the fact that they are part of the solution. And so the forum, the platform for both government and private sector had been missing for a long time. But now you find even the presidential roundtable between the private sector and the government is created that opportunity for the private sector to tell government what they need fixed so that they can thrive in their business. And we've seen greater collaboration now between the private sector and the public sector. And the government, as I said earlier, is now deliberately facilitating the private sector to thrive. The issue, what Akin talked about now, on availing the infrastructure where it is required so that the private sector really comes up and does the investment, is really happening. Look at the last mile. As much as we need to beat KPLC, you see the great work it has done in terms of the last mile, where it is lighting up virtually every corner of this country, starting from all the primary schools, of which now the settlements around those areas really access electricity. This is bringing up, and we are seeing, because of the government strategy again, of distributing the cooling systems so that aggregation of dairy products is afforded, is now becoming a reality because power is now available in the rural areas. And what we see, transformation in the dairy sector. As we speak now, Kenya's dairy sector is flourishing because of the facilitation and the investment the government has done in the rural areas to avail the infrastructure. And the farmers are the net beneficiaries, because at the end of the day, without aggregation, they are able to get better pricing for their products. So the tug of war is really coming down so drastically because of the platforms which have been created for the two parties to engage.
Okay, I'll ask you this question very shortly. Then why is the country importing or spending up to $1 billion US a year, Kenya alone, in imports? Hold that thought. Dr. Dominique Charon, what are the critical policy areas in Africa where reform is needed to support efforts to increase private sector engagement? Critical areas. Well,
I think what's really interesting is we've heard yesterday, certainly, a lot of the public sector and some bank commitments, something like nearly $40 billion. We've got evidence, and Akin was saying certainly that the private sector is also there. There's no shortage of money, but perhaps it's where the money is. We're talking about technology transfer, moving existing technologies, partnerships for uptake of technologies. Great, but that's not going to get us to an agricultural transformation. We need innovation to transform, and in order to transform, Africa needs innovation. In that innovation, we need science investment. There's a tremendous gap in investment in Africa. If Africa represents about 15% of the world's population, maybe 5 or possibly 6 or 7% of the world's GDP on a good day, It's got about 1.3% of the global investment in R&D, private and public, and only 0.1%, 1/10 of 1% of the world's patents are African. So this is a massive gap. If we want to transform agriculture, then we need some of that massive investment and pledges to go towards supporting innovation and supporting Africans to be able to do that innovation. So investment in high-quality science education, high-quality education in marketing and agribusiness, in ICTs, in order to help create the capacity here in Africa to innovate, to do the science, to take the science, to apply the science.
Okay. And having said that, Dr. Shengen Fan, we've been talking about this green revolution, and you said this revolution has to happen. We've been talking about it forever. So why isn't it taking off? I mean, talk is talk. Let's stop talking.
Yeah. I do think it's beginning to take off here in Africa. We have seen successes in many parts of the continents. What we needed to do is continue to scale up some of these successes and to provide an enabling policy environment. Here, I wanted to come back to the policy environment. I have engaged with the private sector for the last maybe 10 years through a World Economic Forum and many other platforms. One thing I heard is incoherent policy. If you go to Nigeria, I'm sorry, both Akim and Kanaya are from Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda. The private sector said, I wanted to invest, but the policy changes all the time. Tariff, tax, import policies, restrictions. So I'm not afraid of, being taxed, but I wanted to see coherent policy so I can design my long-term investment. So for the good of my company, for making money, and to benefit Africa. So here, a couple of policy issues. One is the land policy. We heard about so-called land grabbing, land investment. I think there are lots of win-win opportunities for foreign direct investment here to come. What we need is secured land property for farmers, from any other people. Make sure that farmers can benefit from the land investment or investment from any other countries. So the land policy is critical. Then financing. I think Aki mentioned about the finance. I very much agree. But the insurance is also very critical, insurance. Without good insurance, farmers are very vulnerable to market shocks, to weather shocks, and they will not borrow. So these two together, insurance and financing, has to come together. Then we need innovation. So in addition to innovation in technology, I think the innovation in institutions, in policy, will also be very critical. I'll just give you one example. The one example is a weather-based index insurance in Rwanda, not because Agnes was the former minister of Rwanda, but it was really a very exciting case. So 3 or 4 partners in pushing for the weather-based, weather index-based insurance. One is Agriculture Climate Risk Enterprise. The other one is the Syngenta Foundation. And then Rwanda Insurer, SYS, and a Swiss Re Corporation Solutions. So this, you can see the private sector, the civil societies, and some of the research organizations like IPRI who can help to guide the implementation. And it has become one of the largest agricultural insurance programs in Africa. So just in 2 or 3 years, the number of insured farmers, smallholders, increased by 4 times, from 1,600 to 7,000 farmers, 2 or 3 years. So we must continue to scale this up to make sure that millions and millions of smallholders are insured. When they are insured, then they will be able to borrow the money.
Thank you. Okay, good stuff. Get your questions ready, folks. Get your questions, comments. I'll be coming to you very shortly, very shortly. Good. I see hands up. That's very encouraging. Not yet. Dr. Adesina, before I go to the questions on the floor, Dr. Shengen Fen said something really significant. He said, when governments change, policies change, there's no coherent policy. At the end of the day, are we talking leadership here? And when you answer that, give us, some people may not know what you did in transforming the agricultural economy in Nigeria? Was it with the yam plant, or what is it? You did something that, people were producing yam or some crop. Cassava, yeah, same thing. I'm sorry. Not the same. Was it cassava plant? Go ahead, Doc. Give us that quick example.
Well, I think that the point of consistency of policy is so important. We can't take 10 steps forward. 1 step forward and 10 steps backwards. If you're going to build a skyscraper, right, you build one, floor after the other. And one perennial problem we've always had in African agriculture is the constant reversal of policies, of good policies. Because if you're going to do policies, don't do policies that are political policies. When I was Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, I said we were not going to run agriculture as a political enterprise, that we're going to use evidence-based policies to design what we had to do. It was work. I had no life for 4 years. Those that worked with me knew that. Because we had to fix the system. You've got to fix finance, you've got to fix infrastructure, you've got to build trust between banks and all of those things. You've got to get seed companies working. Jason is there, work on fertilizer sector and fixing all of these things. It's a lot of work. So what I just want to say is that we need to have consistent policies. If you take India, we take most of these Asian countries, they will set 20-year development plans. And it doesn't matter which government comes into power, they will stick to it. That stickability is very, very important in Africa because we waste too much time trying to, go over the same things again. So I think that when it comes to leadership, we need to make sure that we are making decisions based on evidence and that we are also building on what's been done. If you look at the case of Asia, once they've gone, if you take Thailand, for example, Thailand today is the 6th largest producer of automobile in the world. But Thailand actually was the number 1 in terms of rice production. Right? They were consistent in capital accumulation from that, and then they diversified straight into automobile production. But it's not a stop-go thing. You've got to be very, very consistent. And it comes back to the point you raised about trust again. Because once trust is breached, it's very difficult to build. I remember when myself and Sanusi Lamido, now the Royal Emir of Kano, flamboyant Emir and a good friend of mine, we walked into a room with bankers. And people think sometimes it's easy. No, we were in a room with bankers, about 22 bankers, chief risk officers of banks. And I asked them, why aren't you lending to the agriculture sector? Or they say, we would never lend to that sector because our probability distribution shows if we lend to the sector, we're going to lose 100%. And I said, but you're still a banker. What are you doing in the bank if you're losing 100% and you're still employed by the bank? Now, we had to come up with what I explained in my keynote address about this risk-sharing instrument. Then we told them, how much do you think you're going to lose under this new structure? We're going to cover your risk, force loss, and all of that. And one lady got up and said, we think we'll lose 10%. And everybody, all the chief risk officers shouted her down. They said, no, you can't lose 10%. You can't lose more than 2%. Now, you built all of that system. So we have to continue to build on that. Kenyan agriculture here, if you look at what they've done in horticulture, that I said, they build the trust between the importers, the seed companies, carry, and everybody. Those things are important. So just to close, all I just want to say about policy is that policies should be evidence-based policies. We should always adapt policies. We can adapt policies. We can reform as we go. But my goodness, let's not waste time, constantly reversing policies, And the other thing is the importance of political leadership. Because it's really not about us. It's about the farmers. It's about their communities. And so it's not whether, I don't know whether you're running for president or not. But I'm sure you are running for
president of Twitter, yes.
For the Twitter, yes, you are running for Twitter president. But even for president of Twitter, you're going to get competition, So, But I think at the end of the day, we need leadership. One thing I can't forget was, Dr. Kanaya, what is the Indian head of the Indian Agricultural Research Council during Green Revolution? Swaminathan. When Indira Gandhi decided that they were getting PL 480, food aid from the United States, and they decided that they had to feed themselves. And Indira Gandhi asked the question, can we feed ourselves? M.S. Swaminathan was a world-class scientist, said we can. He said, what do you need? We need this and that and that. And within 3 years, India turned around from being a net exporter, a basket case that a Nobel Prize economist, who I will never name, said it will never get out of it. It's going to be the problem of the world for eternity. But look at India today. What happened? Good policies, consistency, investment, and forward vision. My view is that for Africa to move forward relentlessly, we have to be consistent and we have to be tenacious.
Wonderful. Yeah. Questions from the floor. Just tell us who you are, who you represent, and who the question is directed to. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Engineer Abdullahi Abubakar from Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, Nigeria. I just want to re-echo what the last speaker has said, and I want to say at this forum that the Nigerian government has been consistent in its policy at this time, because the federal government has launched the agriculture promotion policy called the Green Alternative. It is a strategy that focuses on solving the core issues of heart of limited food production and delivery of quality standards. It is a follow-up to the agricultural transformation agenda set by the present president of the ADB. It is very consistent. We have taken all that was in the agri-transformation agenda, and it is being followed up to the latter, particularly the growth enhancement scheme, which is loudly accepted by all farmers in the country. Thank you.
So, engineer, that you're making a statement, is that it?
Is that
microphone, please?
Anybody else who doesn't have a speech to make? I'm just a little worried here because... No, not you now. Okay, hold on. You might have a speech. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you. Sandy Andelman from Conservation International. And my question is for Dr. Adesina. You talked about evidence-based policies and evidence-based investments. And we've been working with governments and partners in 5 countries in Africa. And one of the things we found is looking initially at 3 crops, maize, rice, and pigeon peas, independent of soil quality and climate, for farmers who have access to good extension information. In a drought year, it increases yield 40%. And in a wetter than average year, it increases yield 24%. And so if you're only going to make one investment, at least for those crops, it looks like the biggest return on investment is getting good information to farmers. Of course, if you're going to do multiple investments, you can do even better. So as president of the African Development Bank, what kinds of investments are you making in getting better information to farmers?
There's just a couple more questions and then we'll get to you, okay? Ma'am.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Adesina, thank you for that keynote address. You've made a lot of progress in a few months and a lot of commitments. What instruments have you put in place for civil society to monitor that you deliver on these commitments? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's have one more and then we'll get... Okay, sir, yeah, in there. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Anthony Masinde from Farm Concern International in Kenya. My question goes to the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, Mr. Willie Bett. And my question is in regard to contribution of value addition to, from Kenya especially to the international trade, especially to export from Kenya. What commitment is, especially in regard to the commitments from President, what he made yesterday, what proportion will go directly to agro-processing, and what monitoring will be there to ensure that it is monitored, to ensure that growth it is monitored well, and how it will be able to contribute to ensure that it's going to contribute to international trade, that agriculture is being monitored as part of growth of agriculture in relation to international trade. Thank you.
All right, good. Let's answer those three and then we move on. Dr. Adesina, one crop.
Yeah, no, I think it was really great what the gentleman from Nigeria said. I think he was responding to a question, and I think that's the example that we need. That I really commend, because I met with the minister who replaced me in Nigeria during the TCAD meeting, and he talked about continuing the policy. That's exactly what we need. I was very proud of that. And so I wish you guys, all the best as you go. We have all our full support, but that's the kind of consistency that we're talking about. But just on the issue of the Sandy's point on the information to farmers, I think the lack of information is in many ways. It's not just in terms of technology. There is asymmetry of information when it comes to market price information, so farmers are disempowered because they don't have access to that information. There's also lack of information when it comes to access to finance, in particularly for women who will self-select out of a financial market because they don't see women as the finance officer. You go in there, if you're not a man, nobody talks to you, so you stop going, And so there's that part also. But also there's a lack of information also with regard to what are the policies of government. I mean, I think Shengan was talking about it. Sometimes governments may have good policies, but even actors in the sector may not know. So really what I'm trying to say is that we have an information gap that always leads to lack of optimal decision making. For us, whether it's finance, whether it's in markets, whatever it is, for us as a bank, as part of the work that I'm sure Chiji, my colleague, can answer later with more detail, is we're going to be supporting a lot of work on extension. Because I think, right behind you is Ruth Onyango, who is the chair of Sasakawa Africa Association, and we signed an MOU with them during TCAD to basically extend technologies to farmers, but they need information. So a lot more extension workers are going to be needed. But we have to realize that today, the most powerful thing is not even the extension worker. The most powerful thing is the mobile phone. Because without mobile phone, you can get extension information, you can get weather information, you can get market price information, you can get insurance information, almost anything. So we've got to actually get better at making sure that we use the power of the mobile phone to reach the poor. The other one, which I think it's very important for information, we don't always use it a lot, is the radio. The radio, a lot of areas where we can reach, but people are always, you go around, people are always carrying the radio, listening to the voice of Konange, but radio can play a very big role in trying to do that. So building institutions, using mobile phones and things like that, I think can really help to do, and of course building the extension systems can help. On the issue of civil society, one of the biggest problems we have in Africa is accountability. We've got to really recognize there has to be poverty accountability. When I go to work, I tell my colleagues at the bank, we've got to put people at the center of development. It's not the money that matters. It's how we impact on the life of a girl that wants to go to school, that's walking 10 kilometers to go find water. That's what we should do. That's development. Development is not about money. Development is about using money well to impact lives of people. And so what we've done in the bank is that we have a results monitoring framework that allows us to monitor the impact of all of our investments on the ground. We do it in each of the countries. I mean, okay, he's not right here right now. We do that in each of the countries. For civil society, during our annual meeting at the African Development Bank annual meeting in Kigali, in Zambia, I hosted a special session just for civil society. And we used the largest room, the largest hall for civil society. And what I said to them is this: I want to hear the voices of the poor. And I want to see their faces. I don't want long talk. I just want to know what their issues are. And I don't want you doing what others perhaps ask you to say, but I want to know the real issues. So civil society is crucial in bringing that voice to the table and making sure that we see those faces. We are here today. How many of the poor farmers are in this room? They are not here. But we that are here must be the ones that respond to their needs. So we've put in place a platform permanent for civil society. Right behind you is Maria Mulindi. I appointed Maria Mulindi as the senior advisor to the president for civil society. And this is the first time we're doing that at the African Development Bank, because just a week ago, we had a big event in Senegal where we brought all the civil society together, whether it's energy, agriculture, jobs, and so on. What is it that we can do together? How can you hold us accountable, and how can we better serve the poor? So I think civil society for me is very critical in bringing transparency, probity, and accountability into what we all do. So those are some of the things that I can say about civil society. But you are from civil society, and you are always welcome.